Hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today in today's webinar. We are super happy to be having you all here with us. Second. I see a lot of people are already joining, so this is good. Let's go ahead and start today's webinar, which is Supporting Metacognitive Strategies in Speech and Language Therapy with Boom Cards. And today with us, we have the amazing Laurie Matz, which will be presenting the content of the webinar. So first things first, let's do some housekeeping. And the first thing is that we are live streaming this webinar to Facebook. So if you know anyone that didn't register, they can still register, or they can watch this webinar from the live streaming on Facebook. We are recording the webinar, so after you'll be receiving a follow-up email if you register with Laura's information, store links, and also a link to the recording. So the recording will also be uploaded to YouTube, so you can watch later. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, we have a Q&A box. So make sure to add your questions there. And if you have any comments, please make sure to post those on the chat box. So those are two different ones. So if you have any questions, please put those in the Q&A box. We'll be monitoring that to answer questions at the end and in the middle of the webinar. So right now, thank you all for joining. Right now, we're going to do a poll. We want to know who's joining us today, and this is good for Laurie to know the audience who she's talking to. So I'm going to launch the poll right now. It's only 3 questions. So here the first thing is, if you are a Boom Cards creator, if you're an educator who use Boom Cards and the Boom platform, or if you're both, what age range of students do you teach or provide therapy to? So if it's elementary, middle school, high school, or if you don't work directly with students. And the third one is, what best describes your role? You're an SLP, SPED teacher, a general education teacher, OT, psychologist, and other. So thank you all who are responding right now. The majority are Boom educators. We have a couple of creators and a couple of both. So then the majority are elementary. Then we have middle school and some high school. We also have some people that don't work directly with students. So there's that. And then the majority of attendees are SLPs.
Okay.
Yeah, and some special ed and general education. We have 2 occupational therapists. Hello. And then some others. And yeah, SLPs, they're adding in the chat. Educational therapist, teacher of deaf and hard of hearing students, BCBA. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for responding our poll, and welcome to the webinar. Right now, let's go to today's agenda. First, we'll be going over, oh, wait a minute. I'll be stop sharing the poll. There you go. Okay, so first we'll be covering the goals of this webinar. Then we'll be moving into the actual content of executive functions and metacognition, self-talk. We'll see the SLP lens. We'll see supporting metacognitive skills before, during, and after a section, and then some related skills. And at the end, we'll reflect and plan. And lastly, we'll be having the Q&A sections where we'll be answering all of your questions. So as you can see, this is focused for speech therapy, but we'll be talking about metacognition in general, so you can apply this to whatever setting you are in. So now the goals of this webinar is for you to understand metacognition and executive function, explore metacognition from the SLP perspective, learn how to implement metacognitive strategies using boom cards, and lastly, discover related skills and essentials for metacognitive growth. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Laurie.
Awesome. Okay, thanks so much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I am so excited to be here and talk about metacognition. I'm so excited that there are a lot of people who are also really interested in this topic. My background is as a speech language pathologist, like many of you. My roots are in the school-based setting. My passion is for working with children with language-based learning disabilities, oftentimes diagnosed with dyslexia, ADHD, and frequently have executive functioning challenges. And as somebody who works primarily one-on-one with students, I'm always thinking about how we're going to generalize what we do, either in therapy or using boom cards, and how that's going to generalize in the classroom. Too often we hear how students are doing great in the structured setting, but don't apply their skills or strategies in the classroom. So I really spent a lot of time thinking about how generalization occurs. And all paths kept leading me back to the importance of both executive functioning and metacognition in generalization. So for me, that was always an important component when I got into boom deck creation. I didn't just want to make decks to target very specific skills, although I find there's value in having a hyper focus on a particular skill that you can find with boom decks. But I wanted to think about how we could generalize what we do into the classroom. And I primarily make decks that relate to phonological awareness, morphological awareness, semantics, language organization, articulation. Those are like the areas that I tend to make the most decks for, but I'm always kind of thinking about, obviously there are a lot of layers of language and how this applies to the classroom, but those are the ones that I tend to make the most for. And if you like my work, you can find me by searching Little River Speech, Language, and Literacy in the Boom store. And I also started blogging somewhat recently, so you can check out some of my writing there. So also I wanted to say that I'm relatively new in the boom card creation space. And I also view this as an opportunity to talk with other educators, other speech language pathologists who think about how metacognition can tie into how we're implementing boom decks and how we're creating boom decks. And so I hope all of us can benefit from that dialogue. Okay, so executive functioning, metacognition, both of these are definitely buzzwords in the education setting. If you consume a lot of research related to maybe reading and reading comprehension, you're going to see metacognition come up a lot. And maybe if you're in the space of ADHD, maybe in executive functioning, you're going to see executive functioning come up a lot. And there's quite a lot of overlap between how these skills how these skills work and how they're organized. And so the bottom line is that we do have a collection of prefrontal cortex skills. And I'll start with looking at the kinds of things that can occur in the classroom when we do have like difficulties in these areas. We might see students who have difficulty with organization. Maybe they have trouble keeping up with assignments, they're losing materials, maybe they can't keep their backpacks organized, they're forgetting to turn in their homework or missing deadlines. Difficulty with situational awareness. You might see students who have trouble reading the room or knowing like what to say, when to say it, and how to shift from situation to situation. We see students who are repeating similar mistakes. We need to be able to recognize patterns in our past errors and keep those in mind when we're planning for future tasks. So when we see repeating mistakes, we might suspect that there might be an issue. Difficulty considering alternatives. So students need to be able to consider multiple options or ways to do things when they're handling a given problem or a task. And if you find students who are having difficulty in this area, they can become stuck and not know how to recover. We might see rushing through tasks. That could be students who aren't planning for reading the instructions as part of their plan, or they might not be putting enough attention on like that initial planning or instruction phase. We have students who forget tasks. Maybe they've forgotten to do something entirely or forgotten to bring the right materials to class. Or they might forget where they are in the process, like they've maybe written a few sentences of that essay and said, I got it, it's done, but actually they forgot that there was more to do. This can be a sign of executive functioning or metacognitive weaknesses. Procrastination and difficulty with prioritization. So these are things to just start out with, things that you might see when we have difficulty in these areas. These are some really common classroom behaviors. Of course, there are more, but those are the heavy hitters. Okay. So are we talking about executive functioning? Are we talking about metacognition? Are we talking about both? And again, like when you read the literature available on this topic, there's a lot of overlap. Sometimes you'll see metacognition as part of executive functioning. Sometimes you'll see them listed as separate skills. You know, that or sometimes they are in parallel. And so there's a lot of ways to kind of slice and dice the same kinds of skills that we're talking about. And so I'm going to do pretty much that today as well, talk about how they're very similar and they overlap. And the point is that they really weave together, but boiled down to the base core executive functioning skills, we look at inhibition of irrelevant information. So that's avoiding the red herrings or tangents, or inhibiting the desire to do something else maybe more interesting when we're supposed to be on a particular task. Attention control, so that's the ability to direct our attention where it's needed, when it's needed. We need to be able to control this. So if we're busy doing one thing and the teacher needs our attention to maybe clarify or add to the directions, and then we need to be able to put that back on the task that we're doing. Cognitive flexibility, that's our ability to change our thinking when new information or rules come into play. So solving a mystery, we need to be able to hold on to multiple hypotheses and not be stuck in one way of thinking. These are the kids who maybe when they've made a prediction about what's going to happen in a text, and then they read that text and something new comes up, but they're still kind of stuck on their prediction, and that they have a hard time coming out of that initial prediction. And updating working memory. So that's our ability to manipulate what we're paying attention to at one piece of time when we're working on a task. Whereas metacognition, so metacognition is thinking about our thinking. So we need to be able to think about our own thought processes to make a change or adjust what we're doing. And people tend to categorize metacognitive skills in terms of what happens before a task, so planning, monitoring, being able to continuously monitor what we're doing and regulate what we're doing, and then reflection. So all of these skills really are intertwined. I just wanted to go back to what we see in the classroom, these are the kids. So if you think about our students who are repeating mistakes, maybe this is a difficulty in their updating their working memory. So and also a metacognitive weakness in reflecting on what they did in the past to be able to shape their plan. So they need to be able to say, okay, this time I'm making a new plan and I'm going to hold that plan in mind while I'm executing it. So it's both the metacognitive piece of reflecting and then also updating working memory. Our kids with situational awareness difficulties, maybe they're having trouble, the metacognitive skill of self-monitoring, so being aware of one's own behavior and how it might align with the expectations, and also the executive functioning skill of like attention control, being able to pay attention to the relevant social cues. So my point here is that a lot of the things that we see that can come through in the classroom as these overarching issues that might be related to both executive functioning, metacognition, these prefrontal cortex skills, they're very interrelated. Okay. Okay, and I'd love to talk about executive functioning all day long, but today I wanted to focus on the specific metacognitive skills. And so we're going to dive a little bit more into what metacognition looks like. Again, it's that thinking about our thinking, it's your inner voice or your inner visualization skills. And so we need those skills to be able to modify and adjust our actions on any particular task. And this applies to like all layers of learning. So learning vocabulary or preparing for a test. It applies to learning to write a paragraph, learning how to do long division. So it really relates to all layers of learning. And I use this Jenga analogy with my students to talk about what this means, what metacognition means and how it applies. So when you're playing the game of Jenga, we need to have a clear understanding of the goal. So you have to remove a piece, place it on top, and do not let that tower fall. When it comes to selecting your piece to remove from the tower, you need to be strategic. So you're constantly analyzing how the tower has changed from turn to turn and your options are changing. And then in the moment, so this is all before, you're analyzing it, you understand the goal, all before you have this plan. But in the moment, you might pick a piece and you're getting that feedback right away on how grippy your little piece feels. And you're making a decision like, is this going to work? Am I going to make this tower fall? Or do I need to like switch to a different piece? So that whole action of moving that piece and thinking about that feedback that you're getting from the piece is your monitoring. And then reflecting. So, woohoo, I did it. I got my piece on the top. Or it didn't work and it's a whopping failure and you've knocked the whole tower down, and that's very obvious. So I like that analogy whenever I talk about metacognition with my students, and I hope that that also resonates with you all in thinking about metacognition and metacognitive strategies. Okay. So I mentioned self-talk, and self-talk is a tremendous tool. Speech language pathologists use this all the time as a way to support a range of skills. Classroom teachers do this also. And it's intricately related to both metacognition and executive functioning. And I view it as self-talk, it's the window to metacognition. So when I hear a student talking and I can cue them to talk out loud in what they're doing, what their process is, I have a window to their metacognition. And it's also a key to support executive functioning skills. If I can get students to use a little bit more self-talk, we use that as a way to compensate for executive functioning weaknesses and in turn strengthen them. All right, so the SLP side of things. Number one, it's important to note just the high incidence of both executive functioning and metacognitive weaknesses in the populations that we frequently serve. So we're talking about a high incidence in children with developmental language disorder, autism, ADHD, traumatic brain injury, or other neurological impairments. And also the areas that we tend to work on in therapy relate directly back into building metacognitive skills and also executive functioning skills. So when we talk about maybe weaknesses in cognitive flexibility, we tend to, maybe they don't have the semantic network or enough of that language to talk about like shades of gray in their language. So we might work on semantics and figurative language as a way of working on both semantic flexibility and cognitive flexibility. Maybe we have a student who's having trouble problem solving or coming up with solutions, and that can link back to difficulties with complex syntax and verbal problem solving. So just having that structure of like if I do this, then this other thing is going to happen, so I should do this other thing. Those are complex syntax skills that directly tie back into our executive functioning and metacognitive skills. Being able to, in perspective taking, also we're thinking about incorporating multiple perspectives at one time. So there's like that working memory demand there, along with inferencing. And like I had mentioned, self-talk, it's a tool that we use a lot across the board in speech and language therapy. And so just simply employing that is another way to then support students' metacognitive skills and their executive functioning. Okay. So I made this slide to kind of share some of my thinking around how we can support metacognitive skills, also broken down into this like timeline of before the task occurs, during, and after. I want to look at the specific skills, specific metacognitive skills that need to be in place in order for those things to occur, common areas of need, and then ways that we can support them when using boom decks or also outside of boom learning. So before we start a task, we need to be able to understand the goal. We also need to have an idea of how long something's going to take, so that gives us a sense of what we need to do to prepare. We're visualizing what the outcome might be when we do that, and we're also recalling relevant experiences. Students who have difficulties with those particular skills, we might see, like we go back to those classroom behaviors, we might see impulsive beginnings because they just don't know what it's like to start, or they can't map out a plan. And we might also see difficulties with emotion regulation. Maybe they don't remember exactly how the last time went, or they can't, recall the relevant experience, but they know they kind of maybe have a iffy feeling about it, so some of those emotions are coming up. And so to support this, what we can do is we can preview the upcoming task, so as much as possible show what that outcome should look like. We're asking guiding questions and modeling self-talk. So I had mentioned self-talk. So this would be a point at which you might say, our plan is to do this deck that's going to help us with our outline. I wonder how long this is going to take. I wonder, have you done anything similar to this before, maybe outside of Boom, things like that. So we're modeling like what we're thinking about that in that process. During Boom decks, we need our students to have that continuous monitoring and ability to shift when a plan is not working. This places a higher load on working memory demands. So asking students to monitor what they're doing as they're doing it and be able to shift, they have to hold that in mind. So to support that, we can think about ways to reduce working memory load. And also we're promoting that self-talk that occurs during a task, like do I need more time to think? Am I stuck? Do I need to adjust here? Do I need to shift? So those are the kinds of self-talk things that we can model there. And after a task, the metacognitive skill that we need to have in place is the ability to reflect and evaluate on how something went. And this is a tremendous language load. So if any of you have asked a student after they did something quite hard how it went, you're not going to get a lot of language because it's a lot to be able to recall exactly how that went, and you're retrieving a lot of vocabulary, and it's a tremendous language load to be able to talk about how something went and to reflect and to evaluate. So we need to think about ways to scaffold the language to support reflecting and evaluating. I am a big advocate of starting or thinking about gestures as like a starting point for language whenever we've identified that there's a language weakness. And so gestures, like even like thumbs up, thumbs down, or somewhere in between, or like holding up the number of fingers for how something went. But other more iconic gestures like jazz hands or things like that can just get the language going on, reflecting on how something went. We can incorporate feedback forms to reduce the language load. Asking guiding questions or like rating things on a scale can reduce the language load. And again, we can model and incorporate self-talk to reflect and evaluate how something did. So using words like, I realized how we did something one way, this time that really worked for us. Or even like, I wonder how you think that went. So incorporating self-talk can also promote that reflecting piece. Okay, this is actually where I wanted to pause to address any questions before the next phase. I'm going to dive into looking at some actual boom decks. I don't know, are there any questions? There's too much in the chat.
Right now, I'm not
Yeah.
seeing question related to the topic.
Nothing related to the content. Okay, just I see a lot of slides and that's out of my hands, but I'm happy for the slides to be shared. Okay, I can slow down a bit. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I did not see that before. I know that about myself, that I tend to speak really quickly. So
Yeah,
I
that's
have
why I was like, oh, my there. Like, yeah.
Yes, okay. I can definitely, thank you. I can definitely slow down. Okay. All right. And some issues maybe with the audio. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to move on to look at some decks. All right, so I had mentioned that we're breaking down how we can support metacognitive skills before, during, and after any kind of task. So if that's a boom deck or a classroom task. And this initial skill is awareness of what strategies might work. So some self-talk questions could be like, I wonder what we can do this time, what worked well last time, what did not work well last time. And the support plan here is, I'm going to show, this is like a deck series. And this applies to really any boom deck series where you've got boom decks that repeat similar skills but are slightly different from deck to deck. I'm going to show how I'm supporting working memory and language by taking a longer task and breaking it into chunks. Okay, so here's where I'm going to try to shift over to my first deck. Okay. You guys see this? I hope so. This is a deck that I created. This is a series. I've got a number of them where essentially I'll show you like the end goal is to add ideas to an idea list to be able to explain why glasses and binoculars are similar. And they're doing this, basic graphic organizer to then record an answer, or they can, share an answer. And they're going to brainstorm using this. But I wanted to make this, so this is like the ultimate goal, but I wanted to break that down into steps. So when they go through this particular task, first they can listen, or you can talk about the different ways that words can be associated. We can select that we think that glasses and binoculars are related. And then maybe my student wants to talk about how they have a similar function. Okay, and I incorporate a lot of covers to cover up some kind of content in my decks, and I'm going to actually talk about that later. But the idea here is that I'm showing how you can like preview what it is that we're going to do, and then get to the outline piece. So maybe we've decided that I want to choose the word magnify. I'm going to add that to the idea list. And I would type in magnify. Move on to idea 2. And then they can go through the same thing. Note that all association types are possible, but some will be stronger than others. Maybe my student wants to select that they have similar parts. I need a little help on which parts, how they're similar, what part do they share? So, what if we check the word bank? And I want to add that they both have lenses. So I'm going to add that. Okay. So that's the idea. You can continue to move through, but the key point here is that within this deck, I've planned for reducing that working memory load by chunking this down for my students. And then also it's an opportunity for learning from deck to deck. So maybe we did this one today, and then tomorrow or the next week, we're going to do another one just like this on tents versus sleeping bags and go through that the same process. So let's go back to here. Can you guys see the presentation again?
Yes.
Okay. One of those skills in the before phase is estimating how long something might take. And so in any like boom deck series that you have, you might have an opportunity to say, I wonder how long this is going to take and preview and get some kind of estimate. And you actually can see that in the boom learning from the teacher standpoint. So if you go into your classroom, into the reports, you can, and if you select as time as one of the settings, you can see how long a particular deck actually took. So that's a really cool thing to be able to start out the boom deck, get your students to just estimate how long something might take, and then on your side, you can go back through and see. Okay. And during a task. So I talked about how self-talk is a key skill that we want to promote during a task. So self-talk can be modeled throughout a range of tasks. It can be in the classroom, it can be at home when we're cooking, it can be when we're driving, it can be when we're packing. And it's using these metacognitive thinking verbs as we're doing it that enrich like this self-talk to make it to I don't know, give more oomph to our self-talk. And oftentimes our students with language difficulties might not have these words like readily at their disposal. And so we like to really promote the use of metacognitive thinking verbs by modeling it. And then also giving them more opportunities to see it in action. So metacognitive thinking verbs like, I wonder how this is going to go, or reflecting like, oh, I realized I needed my textbook here when I started this, so I went to my locker to get it. I decided that I didn't have enough time to spend too long on this, so I made a new plan to kind of just do bullet points for my outline, and then so on. So we're modeling this self-talk throughout all these processes. I'm going to show a deck where for my students who needed like even more, okay, this is like a self-talk sort. I wanted just more exposure to self-talk, and also this is very meta, but think about the thinking, somebody else's thinking. So instead of like me doing the self-talk or them doing the self-talk, we're going to think about these thoughts. So in this deck, the task is to sort if we think these thoughts occur before, during, or after any given task. And so let's see, so I should check that my name is on the paper. This could happen during, like as I'm actually completing that worksheet. Thinking to yourself, that was easier than last time. This might take me 20 minutes. That's a thought that we'd have before. So Also, a quick note between the during thoughts and after thoughts in this particular deck, and the way that I explained it to my students is that my during thoughts are usually very detail oriented that relate to maybe my to-do list, concrete tasks, details, whereas the thoughts and the reflections that occur after tend to be summaries or like main idea kinds of thoughts. And so in this particular task, I also cue my students to think like, is this more of like a detail type of thought? Like that's probably happening during versus we're going for broader summary ideas here. So, okay, yay, I got it right. I wonder if I should use scrap paper. That's a before thought. I might try that math problem again. Like try again is kind of a task that we can do. So that's a during, but analyzing, summarizing, that was harder than last time. That's something that happens after. Okay, I'll do one more. I guessed a lot on that. Let's see. Let me put this here. I can't. I will need paper for this. Okay. This is something that definitely happens before. This is the after, like recognizing that we needed to make a lot of guesses. I thought I understood, but now I'm confused. This is something that can like kind of be more in the moment. Okay. All right. So anyway, there's more like that, just to kind of give students more exposure and practice to different kinds of thoughts that they can have.
Lori,
Yes.
can you play another one just so our audience can see like more examples of
Yeah,
those?
sure. Okay. So I believe I can do this on my own. That's something that can happen before. Okay, hold on, I need to think a minute. That's a self-talk phrase that we might do during. And reflecting after, I'm glad I started early on that project. So that's a general summary statement. Being generally glad that we started early enough because we got it done. Okay, I checked the board and it helped me. So that's the reflection. The feeling that this is going well, okay? And have I done something like this before? That's something we hope that we're asking before the task. Okay, this seems totally new. That took me more time than I expected. It might happen after. And I think I need to check the directions. Okay. Hopefully, do we get the idea with this?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, cool. Okay, oh, and then how did it go? Let's reflect. So drag the supply box to the thinking bubble that matches how you thought this was. That was easier than I thought. That was harder than I thought. That went just as I thought it would. Or maybe that was harder than we thought. There's certainly room for discussion on if some of those thoughts could have occurred before, during, or after. Certainly, any of them could, and so it's another platform for thinking about that thinking. Okay, great. Go back to present. Okay. Supporting metacognitive skills during a task. And actually this is, I've got a few decks like this. Basically, this is where I got started in thinking about generalization and how it occurs and some of those thoughts that occur during a task. And the problem that I was seeing is that students would have lots of resources. They had their notebooks, they had content posted on the board, they had maybe something posted in their Google Classroom that had the information that they needed to, they just needed to check. And I wanted to think about how that could work in the Boom platform space. And so I just wanted to have something like, and also in thinking about models of learning, creating some kind of space between the content and then doing the thing where you need to retrieve it. So when I talked about covering up that word bank, it's just a cover. It's creating some kind of space, and you have to do something with it. You have to just move it. You're doing an action to get the thing that's going to help you to succeed on that task. So the decks that I wanted to show here just show how we can use a cover to create space. Let's see, this is the one. So using a cover to create space when you're moving from task to action. I don't know if you guys have volume from my decks. In this, this is like a page where students can learn about different ways to spell these vowel sounds. There's many ways to spell E. It doesn't really matter. Can you hear this?
We can't right now.
Yeah, it doesn't quite matter. The point is that on this page, students can learn about different ways to spell the E sound. And then, but what you can't hear is that the audio here is telling them they need to spell the word these. And maybe I forgot how to spell these. So I've put these covers on here. This is a hint. I'm not really sure I remember how to spell these. I need a hint. So I've removed the cover. These covers, I can't keep them over here. So it's created a space. So I have to retrieve that, but I can look at this as many times as I want, because if that's something that you can model. You're modeling self-talk throughout. Do we have it? I think I got it. Let's give it a try. And so I've remembered that it was that vowel consonant E pattern. I got it. Oh gosh, why did that happen? That's embarrassing. Let's skip that one. I have to fix that. This is the word field. Here's field, and I've got a cover here. And okay, I didn't remember, but it's IE. Okay. This is the word each. Do I remember? Well, let me give it a go. I'm just modeling self-talk. Let's give it a go and try what I think I hear. And let's check the hint. And oh no, that doesn't match what I thought. So I need to switch. Okay, so it's an EA, and I'm gonna change. Okay, so these are things that you can do during a deck when you have any kind of like cover. You've covered some information and you have a chance to check. Okay, do we want to see more, or are we okay? This is the word movie. I don't remember. I gave a hint here also for my students who needed, they didn't remember that O can say the OO sound. But I do want them to remember that the M and the V are there. Okay. Okay. Yeah, are we good?
Yes.
Okay, let's move on. So that's one kind of cover. And then to build on this is another series of deck. I do these like sound manipulation tasks, and also a chance to review spelling rules. And the covers, oops. All right, we're gonna go. So first they do this whole sound manipulation activity, but I want to show you the cover. Okay. So here you're hearing spell driver, and they hear driver in a sentence. The bus driver is so friendly, but they need a hint for how to spell drive, or maybe how to spell On the previous slide, we also have reminders for that E drop rule that you need. And they might have to also cover this up to get their hint. Okay, do I need a hint on this, or can I give it a go on its own? Let's see. Yep, that looks right. This says spell given. Gonna give it a go without checking. Okay, let's check your work before we turn that in. Okay, give plus N. We knew the E drop rule. Let's check it. This says spell driven. Well, you just spelled given. That sounds a lot like driven, which you're spelling now. So spell driven. Okay, well, we just did that, so let's give it a go. And let's check. Okay, let's see what happens. And this is also where Boom gives that immediate feedback that if I made a mistake, well, it wasn't on the board, but it was a rule that we had before. So let's fix that up. So it's an opportunity to, when things don't go right, that we can fix them. Okay. Okay, this says ripen. All right, and I think I've got an idea, but I'm gonna do this. Let's check to see if that's right. So I'm constantly modeling that self-talk. No, my board shows that it actually is an I. I'm gonna fix that up and I'm gonna submit. Okay. So that's the idea. The key point is in that learning process, when we can make it active, when we're retrieving that, we've learned something, we've practiced it, and then we need to retrieve it. And so maybe spelling is the example here, but it can be for anything. If we can create like that's a little bit of space. Okay, so I'm gonna move that cover in some of another deck. It physically looks like your notebook. Like let's check the notebook to get that little hint that we need. Can be an integral part of the self-checking, self-reflection, and a great opportunity to promote self-talk skills. So that's the check the board idea, or any kind of cover that we can put on our Boom decks. Okay. And supporting metacognitive skills after. So these are our self-reflection and self-evaluation skills. Like I had mentioned, this is a tremendous language load. So to support the language, maybe we're using gestures even with our students to get them to start reflecting on it, all the way up until we get them to make statements about, well, I didn't give myself 3 nights of studying for this math test like I did last time, and I didn't do as well. So for the next test, I'm going to make sure that I plug in 3 nights of studying into my notebook. That would be a lovely self-reflection statement, but we need to scaffold that process for our students. So I'm just showing 2 examples of how we can incorporate self-reflection in Boom decks. This is showing self-evaluation on a scale. And I mentioned that I also make decks for articulation. As a speech language pathologist, we incorporate a lot of articulation work with our students. And so the audio here is we're just getting so they repeat what they hear. They can record themselves. And when you use the record feature in Boom, the student has a chance to listen to themselves and even do another recording until they're happy with it before they submit it. And then the task here is just to rate on a 1 to 5 scale. This one starts out with like they hear and then they have this as an R shaping, or a vocalic R shaping. So I've paired the vocalic R with the R initial, and so they try silver ring, they can record themselves saying it, they can listen to themselves say it, and they have to rate. And so we go through this, and so maybe I tried Vulture Ridge. And for those of you who have worked, I wanted to just make a comment on specifically, I do a lot of work in phonological awareness, morphological awareness, spellings. I love working with kids with dyslexia, but so often we're also working on articulation. And generalization is a huge piece of the puzzle in getting kids who might sound really nice in the therapy setting, but struggle with generalization. And so using like that monitoring, self-monitoring, anything that we can do to activate monitoring skills can help with the generalization process. And this is, incorporating it early in the therapy process, but we want to do this also as they advance in skills. So that's it. That's the whole idea there, is that they go through a range of R shaping or vocalic R shaping activities and have to rate themselves. Okay. Another shaping activity or a reflection activity is this learning log. And this is pretty common practice, I feel, in the classroom, where maybe teachers ask students to rate how something did or how something went, or keep track of their own learning. But I wanted to bring this to Boom to continually give my students an opportunity to reflect and evaluate on their learning. And so all this is a learning log, and we want to share something that they learned in the process. Even this like initial, this is kind of like an exit ticket, but in Boom, like upon completion of something, we need to select if we're in the beginning, in progress, or wrapping up. I really love having my students like identify that for me at the very end, because of that piece that I mentioned before, where students are convinced that they have completed the task because they did part of the task, but then they forget that they still had more to do. So here we have proof that you said that you were at the beginning. And all this does is it brings you to some sentence frames for something that they can say. They can choose one of these to then draw, talk, or type to share something about their learning. So maybe I have a student who is working on a paragraph and they decide they just wanted to draw. They can use the draw tool, and I say, okay, let's just like draw what you did, and this is the paragraph, and just like draw here. But we know we need to let's make this green because it's our plan. In the future, I'm gonna do a few more lines. So just an opportunity to I know I'm in the beginning, this is what I did. I know I've got several more sentences to write. Just this process of identifying where I am, what I need to do, maybe how I feel about it. And there's a range of questions in there that students can choose. Okay, submit that to my teacher. Okay, and so that's the learning log. Oops. And, oh no, here we go, back over here, sorry. Present. Okay, so that's the guided self-reflection. And this was something cool I learned in preparing for this with Jani from the Boom team, is that students can save cards to their notebook. So if they have a card from a deck that they like, you can, this is really helpful. Let's save that to our notebook. I mean, that's a super practical, real life skill that we need our students to recognize that something was helpful, or, oh, that was pretty hard, I want to save that to practice again. You can do that from the notebook. So this is the student view. And so from the student view, on the bottom right-hand side of their deck, they can just click Save Card. And then when they go back into their notebook, they'll see any of their saved cards. They can click on them. So let's say it was a deck that had like a spelling rule reminder. They can save that. That was really helpful. I needed that. I needed to remember that little thing that I heard about the drop E rule. I want to save that. You're targeting these prioritization skills, identifying the most relevant information, and this builds some of these emerging study skills that we need our students to develop. So if we do this early on, hopefully this becomes more automatic as they progress. Okay. So some related language skills. So Um, Metacognition, executive functioning, these don't exist in a vacuum. There's a lot of language embedded in both metacognition and executive functioning. I'm going to talk about a few language areas that I find to tie in a lot. So we have cognitive flexibility or language flexibility. Let's see. Okay, this is like a word sort puzzle. So if you have a student who you know needs work with language flexibility, this is a kind of activity that you can do. 8 of these pictures belong in the same category. Can you find all 8? The title of this puzzle is well-rounded. So, I wonder if it's all things that are round. So, okay, let's look at those directions again. We need 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Did I get 8? Yes. Okay, let's try that. That was correct. And then these puzzles give the students each of the items that we had already sorted out now can pair with a new, with one of these other cards from the out group. So this cheesy pizza is paired with the grilled cheese. And the football is going to pair with the basketball. The bills will pair with the quarter. This cupcake can pair with the donut. This is like a really great way to talk through what can work. These get progressively harder, and so they're not always as obvious, but also a great platform for talking about why they're related. Why did you pick that? And as okay, so these are both fruit, these are both like shells. And then there's more puzzles like this. Okay, so that's like to work on language flexibility, which like ties into our cognitive flexibility. I had mentioned self-talk, and some key words in self-talk are these metacognitive thinking verbs. But our kids with language difficulties might not always have some of this vocabulary easily at their disposal. And so this is just an activity to work on that explicitly. They have to write a sentence using this keyword or this metacognitive thinking verb. Okay, and they have all these moving parts. So maybe they want to say, okay, so they have to use the word remember. They can also record that if they don't want to type. But let's think of a sentence that can use the word remember, this ski map. Okay, so it could be, I don't remember which way to go. Let's check the map. It's not going to let me go without. Okay. And this one, I have to think of a sentence with the word decide. And here's some help to think of a word with decide. Okay. I decided I needed my bigger bag to fit the soccer ball into. Okay, so it's just a chance to give students like some salient cues to build sentences and highlight some of these metacognitive thinking verbs. So I don't know, I think we need to move this flower vase out of the way so I can see you better in our conversation. Realize, and there's always a moving part. Oh, I realized that I left my water bottle on the kitchen table. I better go get it. Believe. We can say, I believe this puzzle piece should fit in that spot. Here we have to use the word guess. Okay, I guess we can return this magazine to the blue bin, or I guess we should just leave the magazine on the table. Predict. I predict that when we mix the blue liquid and the yellow liquid, we're going to get a green liquid. Anything can work here. You're just playing around with using these metacognitive thinking verbs. Hope. I hope that I can get back to the trailhead before it gets too dark out. Recognize. I didn't recognize you with that costume on. Or I could recognize you even with that costume on. Wonder. I wonder what is behind that tree. Okay. So that's the idea. This is just like a deck to give students just more of a chance to play around with some of these metacognitive thinking verbs. And I'm not sure if I have time to go through this. This is like verbal problem solving, and it's essentially, this is like gives a lot of opportunity for using self-talk, reflection, planning, predicting. I made this deck, and your goal is to make slime. Problems will come up along the way, and your job is to respond to each problem in the most efficient way possible. Great. I guess I have to see them. I'll go through a few of these. Your friend gave you these directions for making slime. It is missing some information. What questions do you have? Type or talk your response below. Okay, do you see the directions that your friend made you? What does it say? Mix glue, baking soda, and stuff in bowl. Okay, modeling self-talk. Is that enough information? I wonder what else we need. This is open-ended, so it'll accept whatever the student wants here for identifying with the missing information. You cannot reach the friend who gave you the directions, so you need to find a better recipe. What do you want to do next? Both of these are possible. They lead you to different things. Do an internet search to find a full recipe. Walk down the street to ask a neighbor. By the way, let's say we decided to go the walk down the street way, but we want to do this again because we reflected that we didn't like that. We can go back. Actually, this one's audio heavy, so I'm not going to do this. So this one, if you click on this, you're going to go down to the neighbor, and you're going to get this like really long spiel from the neighbor. You have to kind of remember what the neighbor said, which is fine. But you can talk about strategies for what's going to help you remember what the neighbor said, or you can do an internet search to find the full recipe. Okay, now we decided we're going to search up a recipe that says which 3 keywords are best for a simple slime recipe. Type them into the search bar. So here we would need to type in simple slime recipe. Okay. So all of this is just like a problem solving, multi-step, lots of opportunities for modeling self-talk. This is like real life kind of stuff that you can do with any kind of like problem solving or like actually making slime. But as you go through this deck, I'm happy if we have more time to show more of this, but I wanted to continue. But an opportunity to work on the language that ties into verbal problem solving, in using self-talk, pausing to reflect, determine did that work, did that not work, as you go through each of these. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation. Present. Okay. All right. So here's the meta slide on our own learning. So one of the goals today is to think about how we can all think about metacognitive strategies in our own work, both in using Boom and also outside of Boom. Thinking about the skills that we're teaching and how we can promote generalization and so on. So, and I've organized this into before, like we do something with a student, or while we're doing something with a student, or after we do something with a student. So before, we can be planning for explicit instruction of metacognitive skills. So looking at the students that we work with and think who needs more explicit time with what is self-talk, or more explicit time with those metacognitive thinking verbs, or more explicit instruction on maybe using visuals or graphic organizers to reduce the working memory load. we're considering, when we're planning for our students, those common areas of weakness. So the students who struggle with the planning phase, we're building in some time where we're going to do some previewing. We're considering where we might need to adjust the working memory or language burden of a particular task. And then we're also, all of these have self-talk all over it, but we're modeling self-talk for maybe why we picked a particular task. So, I noticed last time, like you're really close on that sound, and you have the r at the beginning of words, and we're really getting close to So I picked this activity today. I decided that I wanted to do this activity today that was going to shape that vocalic sound, or modeling that self-talk. While a task is happening, we're incorporating opportunities to self-rate. We can also be taking turns with our students on the self-rating. Oops. Here on my screen. Okay, sorry. Can you, something on my screen looked like it shifted back over to boom. Are we good? Okay, I hope so. So incorporating rating opportunities. I wanted to mention that we don't always have to put the burden of rating on the students. We can also take turns. Okay, sorry. I don't know if people are, it keeps pushing me back over to this other one. Close this. Okay. And then modeling and cueing for self-talk. And then after we're continuing to model those metacognitive thinking verbs, or providing our students with sentence starters to support like more richer reflections of their own work. Maybe we're thinking about using gestures or graphic organizers to support the reflection, and also evaluating how things went for us. So we can model some of those self-talk words, like I realized, or I acknowledge that this happened, so on. Okay, so I have some references here, and here's some information on staying in touch with Boom. And we're going to go on to some questions.
Hello, thank you, Laurie, for the amazing presentation. We do have a lot of questions in the Q&A box. So the first one will be, how would you write an IP goal targeting metacognitive or executive functioning skills? I believe from the SLP.
How would I write an IEP, or?
An IP goal targeting executive.
Okay. Well, number one, it can incorporate the use of self-talk. Of course, some of these are really difficult to measure directly, and we can't always control what's happening inside someone's head, but we might, focus specifically on the presence of those metacognitive thinking verbs, like being able to use, a certain number of metacognitive thinking verbs in a structured activity, or like being able to complete reflection forms, and then perhaps it's also like the rating, how accurately they've rated compared to teacher rating. That can be a self-reflection kind of goal. If it's in the planning phase, maybe we have being able to list the very first step needed to start a task, or planning, being able to list a tool or resource that can help them with a task. So I think that there are things that we can, it's hard you can't like always quantify the things that are happening in a student's head, but we can point to specific indicators if they're maybe either getting the language necessary, or they're demonstrating that they can plan, shift, and reflect.
Perfect, thank you. Let me see, the other one was, is there a definite space where a thought should go, or are they sometimes interchangeable?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Let me see where it is. Is there a definite space where a thought should go, or are they sometimes interchangeable?
Yeah, in that one boom deck where I had the before, during, and after, I think that was the one. And I view that, yes, I wanted my students to categorize them, and I was acknowledging that there was some gray area. Of course, there's gray area, and I'm very happy for like the dialogue to happen with students, like, ooh, the person who wrote this deck must have been thinking this. We think this. I mean, that happens, I think, a lot in as a Boom user and as a Boom creator when something happens wrong. Okay, so today there was an error in one of my decks. It's just an opportunity to say, like, I think the person who created this was thinking this. We think this, and it's an opportunity for dialogue. And what I was saying before with that self-talk sort. The theme there was that the afterthoughts were more like summary, summative analysis type thoughts. And I was hoping that the during thoughts were more like procedural, but that's not, our students can absolutely have like general thoughts happening before, during, or after. So there's really nothing rigid about that. I know it comes across kind of as, because it's a task, I want my students to think about how they can categorize, but I think it's also an opportunity for discussion.
Even like that, or like the learning log, like while you're creating boom cards, I'm thinking that you can also like use a fill in the blank box so they can actually type um, their own thoughts that they had during, after, or before the task. So they can type their own uh, process. So that could be another.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so also we have another question that said, I want to create a sequencing task cards. Student order event task in 3 or 5 steps. Is this supporting metacognitive skills? The sequencing boom cards.
I mean, metacognitive skills are incorporated in like lots of learning tasks. So sequencing is an opportunity for sure to, you're analyzing the information available to you. When you look at the picture sequence, if I'm understanding correctly, you're analyzing what's happening. You're realizing, ooh, I notice some details here. So if you were thinking like you're making this sequencing activity and you want to promote some of the metacognitive like thinking, self-talk, you could provide some scaffolding, like some words on the side, maybe like, what do you notice? To kind of direct them to, or like give them some sentence frames for things that they might notice or analyze or realize. Shifting is huge if you have, in any of these like sequencing tasks. This is a chance where like, okay, I thought this was first, but then I realized that this other thing must be first because, so there's so much language in sequencing and also an opportunity for modeling self-talk. So if the question is, does sequencing support metacognitive skills? Yes, and vice versa, like, because you just have to employ a lot of self-talk throughout that process.
Yeah. And I'm thinking also, if you want to apply something that Laurie teaches today, is that maybe adding a hint, like as a draggable to that card where they are sequencing like the scenes. That can also be good for them. And also I'm thinking maybe before going like over the sequencing tasks, if it's from a story, let's say, maybe you can give them a hint that they will be, after reading the story, they will be sequencing the events. So they can start planning and looking for strategies of how are they going to organize this to later on apply that to the sequencing task. So could be another thing adding to everything that
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. In the metacognitive space, there's this concept of just like adding adding like a space or a barrier or like pause. Anytime that you can insert that little moment of that forced pause or forced space or forced cover is a way to activate like some of that. You're basically you're cueing that thought process. Okay, stop and think, or stop and reflect. So there's lots of ways to kind of create a little bit of a space or barrier in Boom deck design. And also just the simply like you're going through the decks and you're sometimes getting that feedback, like that little ding, you get that immediate like, well, at least whatever I click matches what the person who made this thinks should be the answer. Sometimes, but yeah, you can move forward and reflect on that.
Perfect. Then we also have, do you have ideas on how to support metacognition in preschool or kindergarten?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think number one is that it's that language. So, modeling the self-talk process. And so, we're there's lots of opportunities for modeling. And also any kind of like, let's say it's, we're going to collect some, okay, my son, like my son is a kindergartner and they had a task. They were collecting leaves and sticks and acorns to make like a human figure, right? And so I imagine that there's planning for going out and what do we kind of need, and okay, well, if our goal is to make like a human figure, we need sticks because I'm visualizing the arms and I'm visualizing that this human figure that I'm going to make is going to have eyes or whatnot. And so you're kind of keeping that plan in mind as you're collecting the leaves and sticks and things that you find in nature. And then you're actually doing the task. And so you can reflect, does this match what you imagined? All kinds of problems can come up and we might need to shift. So that's a huge skill that we can work on. And then the reflecting and evaluating. Again, it's building those language skills to be able to say how something went and then potentially wrap that into a plan for the future.
Thank you. Then we have, do you sell any of your Boom card decks or templates of activities you have shown us? Where do you get the images you use in them? Looks great. Wondering how to create this type of activities for my students. Thanks.
Yeah. So I make everything in Canva. So that's where I have like a Canva Pro where you can have access to an image library and have license to share and sell those. So that's where I get my images. I don't know. Does Boom give you the option to sell a template? I don't know because I imagine like for spelling things, like I honestly don't know. I'm really happy. I love collaborating and sharing ideas. So if anybody is out there and a Boom creator and wants to huddle and make something similar because it's helpful for your class, feel free to reach out. But yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, like selling templates is not really a feature, but we know that you do have the decks in your store. So if you like them, you can go ahead. And also you can reach out to Laurie and suggest some decks that maybe she can create now that she has these templates. And in Boom, we do have, if you're a colleague or if you add yourselves as colleagues, you can share a deck that you create. So, but yeah, that will be if you're a colleague. So that's another way that you can do it. If you have a colleague in Boom, you can create your own deck and then you can make a copy and transfer that deck to the other person's.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I didn't realize that. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm very collaborative. So happy to share.
Or later on, we can have a webinar teaching like how to create this type of decks. That can be
Totally.
another
Yeah.
tutorial. So thank you for that. Let me see. We have here, do you click and listen to options or do students have to read them? I'm not sure if this.
Uh, well, in general, I do have a few decks in there that don't have audio. I'm trying to incorporate audio into more. I know that today, like the audio that was within my boom decks that wasn't sharing um, on the presentation, but usually, I mean, if I do have audio, it is clear, like it'll say click to listen, or you see the audio icon.
Mhm. Then we have, is there a developmental hierarchy for metacognition? We have two questions about that.
Okay. That's a great question. I don't have a great answer for it. I mean, I know that like in thinking about the language skills, um, we, are expecting to see, obviously some of that incorporates complex syntax or some of that higher level vocabulary we're not going to expect at the earlier age. I also know that in terms of like metacognitive skills and executive functioning skills, in the earlier years, that they're very intertwined and often look very similar, but that as the prefrontal cortex matures, they can become more distinct processes. And so you can have students who show stronger metacognitive skills but weaker executive functioning skills, or stronger executive functioning skills but weaker metacognitive skills. So they'll develop distinctly. But I could not, off the top of my head, give you like I wish I could, but a developmental trajectory.
Related to that one, we have how do you structure activities for executive functioning for students who have autism in grades K to third?
Okay, sorry, one more time.
How do you structure activities for executive functioning for students who have autism in grades K to third?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that depends on the skills that are already present, the extent to which that the use of language and the awareness that's already in place. And so I think it's also essentially going back to the analyzing the skills that are at play, like that grid. Um, this is where I would start, is just kind of thinking about what skills are needed, and breaking that down into exactly where that student is at that age. So I imagine that, in kindergarten, and if there are delays in language and executive functioning, that they're going to need a lot of support, but that we can be modeling, we can be using a lot of visuals to support what the goal is. You can physically show what that goal is going to look like, estimating time, like having real clocks out, having visuals or catchphrases that you use in the class to show the monitoring. So it's pretty individualized, I would say, but I guess I would start here on thinking about the different layers of metacognitive skills and then structuring from there.
Yeah, and also I saw a question somewhere, but I cannot find it right now. And it was like related to lower grades. And also for autism, I know something that works a lot are the social stories. So maybe you can create one to show them, like to show a kindergartner, like applying self-talk, applying planning and all these strategies. And that way teaching them how they can do it like on their own. So that can be another question.
Yeah. I know like a very early developing skill that I might target with somebody who has very weak like self-reflection is just being able to assess for themselves. Like I tend to work with older students, but just like, are you thinking or are you stuck? So being able to differentiate that and using a visual, like thinking or stuck. Are you still thinking? Are you still processing? Or are you stuck and you need help? And so just being able to like verbalize that or indicate in some way, I'm still thinking or I'm stuck, it is a early developing skill.
We had a question related to that. So that's good that you said that. So we have, in terms of generalization, I am thinking about how oh my God, I'm sorry, I cannot read today. I am thinking about how I am delivering services. What do you think about working with students in the speech room versus pushing into the classroom? I would think generalization will happen more quickly in the push in model, or getting content from the teacher in language arts, science, social stories, etc. Any
Yeah.
thoughts?
I mean, absolutely. There's space for both push in and having students outside of the room. Um, you know, yes. So that's an issue that I have encountered too, like outside of the classroom, being able to think about the discrete skills that you're working on and how that can translate. I have typically found that students need some like direct exposure to whatever this, whatever their goals are. And that can happen outside of the therapy room because they need some direct, they maybe need a lot more trials and a lot more practice with that specific skill. But then being able to also be in the classroom or collaborate with the teacher on how they can, be able to use that in the classroom. So, the model, I don't say, I think it's also very student dependent. Some students also, when you talk about the emotion regulation piece, okay, like we have to also recognize that being in like the profession where our job is to work on skills that are harder for our students, that emotions might come up in that process. And it might be a lot harder to regulate emotions when you're also looking at like your buddies or like, there's a lot of distractions. And so thinking about that working memory demand. And so that might be a lot easier to address certain skills when we can like control for that. They can be out of the room and you can, structure and maybe make more progress on an individual task. So again, this is really student dependent. I certainly wouldn't make a blanket recommendation like pushing in for all students because that's better for generalization, or staying out of the classroom for all students because that's better. So it really is case by case.
Okay, so we are almost at time, but I want to address, we have like a couple of questions related to the same thing. It is more like if you have a way to quickly evaluate if a student is struggling more with executive functioning, metacognition, and also ways to evaluate metacognitive and executive functioning formally or informally.
Yeah. There are definitely checklists out there that ask questions. I mean, these are geared more towards higher level students. Again, I think the overlap that you're going to see when we talk about like the what you might see in the classroom, these are signs that there might be something going on with executive functioning or metacognition. And when I had returned to this slide, like each one of these difficulties could be due to an executive functioning weakness or a metacognitive, weakness, or both, and really like, well, ultimately, however you slice and dice it, we know that this is the goal, is that we can improve some of these areas for the students who already struggle with some of these skills. So, I don't have a problem, like some of the checklists that you'll see out there, executive function is listed on the top, and metacognitive skills is listed like as a supporting skill. Sometimes I haven't really seen things that are purely like a metacognitive skill, rating, that's like a standalone, because so often it's intertwined with executive functioning. This is, I think, where your clinical judgment needs to come into play, and your observations from the classroom.
Okay, well, thank you very much for all of your questions, and thank you, Laurie, for answering all of those. If you can go to the slide where like the contact info for them to, I know many people were asking for that slide, and also for the references one.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's in there. Sorry, and the one more thing on the evaluation piece is the Self-5 metalinguistics is a really nice tool. So that can give you a lot of information, but it's not necessarily, the checklist or ratings too. Okay, sorry.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you
happy
for
to share.
answering the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Okay, so if you have any other questions or comments, please send those through email, help@boomlearning.com. Lori, if you can go to that slide, is at the very end before the feedback
Oh,
form.
yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, gosh.
In the follow-up email, we'll be sharing a link to the recording and also a link to the feedback form. Please fill out the feedback form. We learn from that. Right now, one thing that we apply is having a longer webinar. So we do hear your recommendations. And so if you can scan the QR code or use the link that I sent in the chat to fill out the form, we'll be more than grateful. And then the recording will be uploaded to YouTube and you'll be receiving a follow-up email with everything, including a link to the slides from the presentation. And from there, you can also have the list of references. I know there were a lot of people asking for those.
Okay.
So that will be also in the follow-up email. And then I got a lot of questions about certificate of attendance. So if you want to receive a certificate of attendance, we won't be giving credits, but we do certify that you attended a webinar that was an hour and a half long. So if you want to receive a certificate of attendance, please email us at help@boomlearning.com. Lori, if you can go back to the other slide. Sorry about that. Go back.
Oops, sorry.
Worries.
Okay, this one.
There you go. Yeah. There's the email help@boomlearning.com, and you can mention that you attended the webinar and that you're interested in receiving a certificate of attendance. So that will be all for this webinar. Thank you again, Lori, for presenting today's webinar. Thank you all who attended. We hope that you a lot about metacognitive skills and also executive functioning. Thank you all for sending your reactions, and we'll see you all in our next webinar. Good night.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Bye.